description of a debate between two hugely different theories. One is, did the crisis occur because the federal government told Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae to underwrite mortgages that should not have been underwritten, were below commercial grade mortgages incentivized by the Bush administration and the Clinton administration, Department of HUD. The answer to both of those questions is yes. Then when they were securitized, they carried the imprimatur of Freddie Mac and Fannie Mae, though they did not have the commercial viability implicit in such an imprimatur, and they turned out to have a huge degree of risk. Then the banking regulations, another government rule, required mark-to-market. So a mortgage-backed security had to be carried at zero. The bank freezes. Bank lending closes down. That's my belief of what happened. And the correct approach to it is to oppose too big to fail and to allow the opportunity to succeed and the responsibility to fail. The alternative approach is a public utility model. Let us impose, as we have in, let's say, electricity carriage, or in the old days, railroad rates, a government agency that will decide what rate of return is appropriate and what steps are going to be permitted. I have two comments again on this issue that bear on the previous one, Dina. To the extent we're speaking about corporate management, at least one of my colleagues, Republican colleagues' record will be quite fertile ground for the Democrats. I say that without being unfair. It will be fertile ground. They would love to explore that and try to run against the abuses of corporate America. That is what they will say. And the other is my record in the House. When President Clinton and the Republican leadership were pushing Graham Leach Bliley, Graham Leach Bliley was the overhaul of the banking system to repeal Glass-Steagall and to allow investment banks and commercial banks, insurance companies, real estate companies, all to be under the same bank holding company. I was worried and voted no. How many Republicans in the House voted no on this bill sponsored by our leadership? 5. And I was one of the 5. So I've got a record in the context of the legislation that I stood up to the argument that we needed to get our banks bigger, better to compete with Europe and Asia. And that led, at least in significant part, to too big to fail. So now today, Senator Dodd's proposal appears to be, given that we will bail you out, given that we've already crossed that psychological and political bridge, we ought to have some mechanism to make sure you don't make crazy investments. Essentially, that's the FDIC model expanded to all investment banking. For the FDIC, I understand if you're going to be insuring deposits, you don't want the insured institution to take exceptional risk. But the other route, and the one that I think is preferable to the Dodd bill, is to say there is no backing from the federal government. If you fail, you fail. We should have allowed General Motors to go bankrupt. We should have allowed AIG to go bankrupt. I have consistently said that. It gives me an opportunity for a moment to correct something that the other colleague, Chuck DeVore, has been saying inaccurately, and it is not a question of me correcting or explaining. It's just a question of me saying what I believe. I have never supported the bailouts. I thought that that was a huge mistake. What I did say and do maintain is that there is a role for the Federal Reserve to take the toxic assets off the bank's balance sheet, because some of those assets will have value and come back, but at a substantial haircut. And what I proposed at the time is what Hank Paulson said he was going to do. Then, I used the phrase bait and switch. They got the Congress to appropriate $700 billion and use that for GM bailout, for Freddie and Fannie purchase, for AIG bailout, to buy stock in the banks, not a dime for the transfer of the toxic assets. So the contrast between me and Senator Dodd, and in this case Senator Boxer with Senator Dodd, would be a hugely important one, a philosophy of free market, less regulation, opportunity to take upside and responsibility to take downside. And I think it'd be major to have somebody in the Congress, in the Senate, who truly is committed to that free market philosophy, and I am.
And one